we've got a very divided sort of, not literally, but I mean, we're all in the British Army, but the Scottish regiments are we're always separate and on their own right. So the
Gotcha.
infantry.
So you
So I
joined
joined the infantry, yeah.
the infantry. So was there when you get to the infantry, are you thinking already, I want to go to the SAS? Did you even know what the SAS was at that point in time?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was well schooled in the military side of things because I grew up with it.
Right.
And I guess although it didn't feel abnormal to me, I just didn't really think that it was my only option or something that I was definitely going to do. So that's going back to about my brothers. They were always going to join the army. That was all they wanted to do. For me, I didn't necessarily have all my eggs in one basket. And so when I eventually did do that, then my mind, I kind of turned the dials a little bit because I found out that when I did join the military, I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. And also, I was very good at it. And finally, for me, it was like, well, I went through school and was kind of subconsciously conditioned to believe that I wasn't really good at anything apart from art. I was good at art in school. That was it. I was good at making stuff out of wood and metal and paint and drawing and all that. But I didn't really think I could do anything with any of that. And so when I then joined the army, and I was, very fit, physically fit, and I was coming first in all the tests, and I just took to it really well, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the camaraderie more than anything. It was just like being around guys my age and maybe a bit older, and we had such a good laugh. It was such a good time, and everything was done for you as far as logistics are concerned. You got paid at the end of the month. You got a bed to sleep in. You had a roof over your head. You were fed 3 meals a day. You had social time. You had a lot of security and safety and certainty as a result of that. So for a young boy or a young man, um, just through adolescence and getting into adulthood, it was a nice place to be. So when it comes to the whole SAS thing and did I know what it was, I was very aware of it and I was obsessed with this movie. I was obsessed with a movie called Who Dares Wins. Lewis Collins. It's a classic movie. It was like kind of around the time. I think it was made not long after the Iranian embassy siege. So it was loosely the framework was loosely kind of based on something similar, but it was a bunch of people that took over the American embassy, and there was a siege, and then obviously the SS and did a rescue mission. Um, and I remember being obsessed with that film because there's one particular scene for anyone who's seen that movie. There's an unforgettable scene where they're running through the American embassy, and Lewis Collins is like he's in there as an agent, and he's undercover, and so and he's actually a retired SAS guy. He was kicked out of the SAS, but he ends up in with this. He ends up gathering intelligence and getting in with this woman who's one of the heads of this organization. And there's a part in the movie where the SAS come in and they storm the embassy, and he links up with him, and he's just got like a white shirt with an open collar, and he's a real handsome bloke, and he's like a real cool guy. He died a few years ago, unfortunately, but he'd have been an amazing James Bond, by the way. That I always thought he should have been James Bond, but regardless, that's another story for another day. There's a part in it where they're like on V formation, running down the corridor of the embassy, and he's point man, and he's got this white shirt with the open collar and a pair of black trousers on, and he's running with this machine gun, and all the SAS guys in black and respirators are behind him in arrow formation. It's just like the coolest thing ever, and the music's really cool. And if you've ever seen that movie as a young kid, that was like I want to be that. That's what I want to do. So I guess when I joined the army, um, you're asked about all these things. You're given information on what all the other regiments are, how the military works as a whole organization. And I remember being week one in basic training, and the platoon commander said, "Does anyone know what this cap badge means?" And it was a picture of the winged dagger. Who dares wins? And I put my hand up and says the SAS, and he says, "Is anyone here any aspirations to ever join this organization?" And me and one other put our hands up, me and one of my friends. And ended up leaving the army, and I ended up joining about 5 years later. So it did actually, I kind of manifested that.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
And to a reference point, I don't know if you're familiar. The story you just told is very interesting because there's a movie a lot of American tier one guys will talk about. It's called Red Dawn. It's from the
yeah,
1980s. And I have
good.
had so many guys that were either
Mhm.
on SEAL Team 6 or Delta Force. They said when I was a kid, I was, maybe they were like 10, 12, whatever. They're like, the first time I saw that movie, all I ever wanted to do after that was run around and
Yeah,
shoot communists in the mountains. It's like they
yeah.
universally love that movie, which it's interesting because you kind of have roots to a movie of your own.
It is. It's a great movie. I suppose it's a transatlantic thing, right? We could relate to the British movie rather than something American because in the UK we're a very small island, and I guess that there's not as much association with what's going on across the pond. So American movies are very Hollywood, and although Who Dares Wins was still very far fetched, it was because it was a British made film, because it was probably a bit more resonance to us guys growing up there.
So when you make the decision that you're going to attempt SAS selection, is it something where they come to you and they're like, "Hey, we think you could potentially be good fit here," or do you have to initiate that process of trying to make that? How's that work?
They don't come to anyone. I mean, they've never had a although recruitment is fairly sparse, excuse me, but they don't headhunt anyone. It doesn't happen. Uh, because it's a volunteer, you've got to do it as a volunteer. And so I mean they will do like recruitment presentations. So they have a team that goes to I've actually done this myself. I did it with them. It was quite one of the coolest things I ever did actually was after I had been in the SAS for probably a couple of years, I went back to my old unit and delivered a presentation on selection process on the SAS in an effort to try and recruit other guys to come forward because it's one of those things. It's like the big scary monster in the closet. No one wants to look in there. It's the fear of failure that gets people. So when it comes to that mystique around the SAS, that's it's like a double-edged sword, really, because they don't overtly say, "Come and join us. This is great, and everyone can have a go." They don't really want to be asking us, and I kind of get that. I kind of caught that from there and into what I do now. I've always been very kind of I'm not blasé about asking people to come on my coaching program, but then that's kind of it kind of it doesn't really serve my bigger purpose staying like that because I want to help as many people as possible. And so the mystique's kind of cool, but it's double edged because people sometimes think it's not for them. So anyway, I volunteered for it because I just thought, I've always had this mindset, and I've always had this real hunger for doing things that no one else has done or people don't normally do. I like to be the guy who does something that not a lot of people are doing. I like to challenge myself. It's just all about a personal challenge, and maybe I could do that. Why not me? What if I could be the one to do that? So that's always been a mindset of mine. So when it came to going forward for the SAS, I didn't tell anybody at first. I just did it. I applied, and I wanted to keep it to myself. And I just applied for the joining instructions for the selection course. And I remember I was actually out in Kosovo at the time in 1999, and we were in a place called Podievo, and I never get any mail. No one sent me mail, so I got this letter through the door one day, and it was a brown envelope. And I always remember the day I opened this envelope, and it was my joining instructions for my pre-selection course. And I always remember that feeling that I took the paper from the envelope, and there was two winged daggers on the top of the paper, the headed paper, and I was just like, just the feeling I got from that was kind of like this is now real. It's like this is a letter to me with this insignia on it, and it felt really special at the time because I was the first one to go for it in a long time, and the first one to ever pass since like the 1970s.
From okay, hold on. I got to ask about this. When you say the first one to pass since the 1970s, do you mean from the unit you were currently in?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
yeah. Not obviously there'd be no regiment, but
Yeah.
a bunch of old guys from the 60s. But um, Yeah, so the last guy who had joined the SAS before me was actually my first ever commanding officer when I joined the infantry. When I joined, so the unit I joined was called the Royal Highland Fusiliers. It was a Scottish infantry battalion, and no one was in the SAS from there. And one guy had been, and that was the commanding officer. You know, the guy who was in charge of the whole unit, and he had joined in the 70s. Um, and no one else had managed to get in since then. So you can imagine it's a bit like, sometimes others have got to succeed before other people will believe it's possible. Otherwise, if the opposite happens and people go forward and people fail, it kind of demoralizes future generations and just makes people think that what's the point in even trying because he didn't get in and he's better than me in my mind. So why would they take me? So it was a big step, but then I suppose it was such a big step that there wasn't really any pressure. You could see it in two ways. It was a double-sided coin. In one hand, there's lots of pressure because it's a big step, and you're leaving yourself open to criticism if you don't get in. They told you so. People will be the first to say, "Yeah, well, I knew you were too young, or you were above your station, or you were out of your depth." And then in the flip side of that, there was no pressure at all because I thought, well, no one else is doing it. I don't really have anyone to compare against. It's not like I'm not doing what other people have done. I would be the first. So if I don't get in, then I'm just another one of the people that didn't get in. But if I do get in, then that's quite going to be pretty special. So that's what kept me motivated.
I love that. I love